Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Coming up, a brand new administration official already being summoned to explain his tweets on immigration from 11 years ago. His position apparently not nearly progressive enough for some of the most progressive Democrats. The cancel culture train remains on the tracks. But first, you may disagree with Supreme Court rulings, but regardless of what you think, you got to abide by them. I don't agree with SCOTUS on all of its decisions, but I always accept the fact that they're the final arbiter on issues. Well, apparently Florida Governor Ron DeSantis disagrees. Now, I predicted from the moment President Biden implemented the vaccine mandate that the vaccine requirement on private businesses would get struck down based on previous OSHA cases and how they're trying to use emergency authorization. You may recall I was mocking the left-leaning legal analysts, all claiming it would be smooth sailing, no legal impediments here. The court in a 6-3 ruling struck it down. The less discussed part of the ruling, which I also predicted, let me say I get things wrong a lot, I just happen to be right on this one, was in a 5-4 decision, the High Court gave the green light to a requirement that healthcare workers in facilities that receive Medicare and Medicaid funding must be vaccinated. Now, I get that the Florida governor likes one part of the ruling, but not the other. But that doesn't mean he gets to go rogue and continue to try to enforce a state law that prohibits vaccine mandates for all industries, including the healthcare industry. This includes fines of up to $50,000 per employee violation. Governor DeSantis' spokesperson in an email saying, in part, quote, the state of Florida is not going to serve as the Biden administration's biomedical police. Firing unvaccinated healthcare workers, many of whom have infection-conferred immunity, is unethical and unscientific on its face. Now, I respect his right to feel that way, but that doesn't change the ruling from the High Court. He's welcome to criticize Justice Roberts and Kavanaugh, who sided with the 3 liberal justices, as Governor DeSantis did on Friday.
Honestly, Roberts and Kavanaugh did not have a backbone on that decision. That's just the bottom line.
But words and actions are very different. And of course, the White House has promised to enforce the mandate, which could spell trouble for facilities that don't abide by it. If facilities are not able to report that 100% of their employees have gotten at least a first dose of the vaccine or an exemption by January 27th, the federal government begins by issuing warnings. Eventually, if the facility doesn't comply with the rule, it could lose federal funding. Still, some in the governor's state are standing by his side. Here's what State Representative Anthony Sabatini tweeted out. Quote, any Florida hospital which proceeds to fire healthcare workers in an attempt to further Biden's OSHA vaccine mandate must have its license pulled, have its funding cut, and face max civil fines. Florida must use any means necessary to end hospitals' complicity and protect workers. And joining me now is Florida State Representative Anthony Sabatini, representing Florida's 32nd District. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. So what am I getting wrong here?
Well, thanks for having me on, Dan. I don't think you're getting it wrong. I think you're very accurately describing the fact that we in the free state of Florida will not comply. We're going to be fighting back. We're going to be pushing back against what we believe to still be an unconstitutional mandate, which ultimately harms citizens and healthcare workers. We have people with natural immunity who are being fired. They're having their whole lives upturned, and it's fundamentally wrong, and it's time for states to step up and take a stand.
But that's a policy disagreement. You lost at the Supreme Court on this issue. The Supreme Court has weighed in and said that the federal mandate can move forward. So isn't it time to at least you can say, look, I think it's horrible, I disagree, we think it's bad for the state, we think it's bad for the country, but don't you kind of got to suck it up and say, all right, now we got to move on?
Well, I would quote Andrew Jackson when he famously said to Justice Marshall after a famous case concerning the U.S. Bank, he made his decision, let him enforce it. If Biden wants to enforce it, let him try, but we in the free state of Florida are going to be standing in the way and doing everything we can to protect both the rights of healthcare workers and the people in the state of Florida. We have some of the best response, I think some of the best response to COVID nationwide. That's been proved time and time again. And some of the states with the most restrictive and insane mandates actually have the worst rates, the most death, the most carnage, and the most destruction of small business. So I think we're doing a great job here where we should be really pushing back. And if the feds want to try to enforce it, that's fine. But there is wiggle room in the Constitution. The 10th Amendment allows states to basically not comply. Those on the left, when it comes to sanctuary cities and things related to that, they find ways to either not comply or interfere with federal interference. And I think on the right, we need to start thinking more creatively and do what we need to do to protect the rights of people.
That's a great example, the sanctuary cities. And I want to ask you about that. What sanctuary cities are effectively is a city will say, we're not going to cooperate, right? We're not going to share information, et cetera, to help the feds. So, but that's different. What you guys are saying is not only are we not going to cooperate, but we're going to punish the places. We are going to enforce this. We are going to fine them. We are going to try to harm them if they comply with a federal law. So in using your example, if there's a tough federal immigration law out there and the entire state of California says, we don't like this law, we don't like that the Supreme Court upheld this immigration law, we're not going to not just enforce it, we're going to now start punishing anyone who tries to enforce it. You would support that?
Well, you're using, I think, a word that has a lot of connotation to it, laden with strong connotation, punish. What we're doing is saying that we have a law that protects the rights and health care medical decisions of Floridians. And if a private company wants to try to seek more money from the federal government by stampeding on the rights of others, then we're going to make it more difficult for them. So some would say Florida, in your words, might be trying to punish someone. I don't think that's an accurate use of language. I think the Biden administration is certainly trying to punish and play a game of chicken here. I think Florida is trying to properly assert its own police power.
Okay, so let's agree that the Biden administration is punishing. What is the remedy when someone doesn't follow the law as it's stated in Florida on this issue, right? And they have a vaccine mandate. What happens to that company?
Well, I will tell you this. Right now, when it comes to the law, the thing that's on the books right now, and of course, I can't speak for the governor. I'm a legislator with my own set of policy views. But right now in the books, that hospital would be basically facing a pretty big fine. There'd be legal actions commenced from our attorney general, and legal fines would come along with that. I think we should go much further. I really see this as a major line in the road. I think if we allow the Biden administration through CMS to commence this type of action, Lord knows what's going to come next. So I'm a big believer in actually trying to nullify this law and really face down this threat to liberty. But right now, they would just be facing civil fines under the law that's on the books in Florida.
And so, and again, using your philosophy here, you would encourage other states that disagree with a federal law that is upheld by the United States Supreme Court to, quote unquote, fight back and not just impose fines, but go much further than that. It does feel like you're saying Supreme Court shouldn't matter.
No, I think this obviously Supreme Court plays a major role. I think generally, especially when you have the right justices on there, they're interpreting the Constitution based on.
What difference does it make what the justices are? It's a question of do you agree to abide by the United States Supreme Court rulings or not, regardless? Because I do, regardless of who the justices are. I don't say, well, it depends on who the justices are. That'll determine whether I abide by the Supreme Court. Whoever the justices are, I abide by the Supreme Court's rulings. And it sounds like you're saying you don't.
Well, I think you're trying to put it in really plain sort of black and white terms. And obviously, I think, there's nothing wrong with looking at that for a second. But I would just encourage you and your listeners to step back for a second and really look at the history of constitutional battles. I think that the founding fathers really built into the Constitution in sort of unstated ways a way of basically allowing for tension and friction between state and federal power. I don't believe states need to just lay down and do whatever the Supreme Court says in any case and really be eager to implement whatever they tell them to do. Well, I think states can make things a little bit more difficult for the federal government, and I think that's perfectly okay. And I think it's a natural tension in sort of the system of federalism.
Making it difficult, I get, right? Where we're not going to assist in enforcement, we're going to play some games here and there. That's very different from saying, because you're sticking these poor medical facilities in the middle here, right? Where you're saying to them, you better not do it. The governor's coming out and saying, you better not do it. And if you do, you're going to be in huge trouble for abiding by the federal law. I mean, you don't have to kind of take a position on this stuff, is what I'm saying, to say, do I support, don't I support? All I'm saying is, I support the United States Supreme Court. And when the United States Supreme Court issues a ruling, I say, okay, I got it.
Well, here's what I would say. Your characterization of these as being poor institutions, I think, is a little bit inaccurate. Hospitals are generally the wealthiest entity in most commonplace American cities. I care about the healthcare workers. I don't care about the large abstract corporation, nonprofit corporation called, X, Y, or Z hospital. I care about the lives of the nurses, the medical freedom of the people who live in my community. And that's what really I'm seeking to help. And so these giant monolithic hospital complexes, which own 50, 60 hospitals who are making billions of dollars, of course, they don't label them as profits. They call them just, expenditures minus revenues or whatever in nonprofit language. But that's not really at the heart of this matter. I think it's about protecting the rights of actual people, not the entity.
I'll agree with you that that's not at the heart. I'll agree with you that's not at the heart of the matter. Let me ask you a final question here, because I was interested in this. I saw you in another interview. You were asked if you're vaccinated or not. You said that you're not going to answer the question and you never will. Do you think that someone in a position like yours, who's in a position of leadership, should have to disclose on any issue whether they've done something personally that applies to everybody else? Putting this aside, just don't you think as an obligation for someone in a leadership role talking about these very important issues that matter a lot to the country and clearly matter a lot to you to say either I'm vaxxed or I'm not?
Well, actually, I'm not vaccinated, and I have no issue answering that question, and I don't plan to be. The journalists you're mentioning, I just didn't think of them as a legitimate journalistic agency.
God. Okay,
I thought
fair
they're
enough.
sort of like
Fair
this
enough.
new age media that loves to just try to cause tension. I think of obviously some other agencies asked me, I'll be honest about it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And that's the answer. You got me on that one. Representative
Yes,
Anthony
sir.
Sabatini, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Have a great night. Talk to you soon.
Coming up, once again, Democrats turning on their own. The vice president's new communications director, Jamal Simmons, has been summoned to explain not progressive enough tweets on immigration from more than a decade ago. And wait till you hear what he said. Well, it won't be particularly controversial to most, but it's apparently blasphemy to the most radical part of the Democratic Party. That's up next. It did not take long for some Democrats to turn on Vice President Kamala Harris's new communications director, Jamal Simmons, who started as the VP's head of communications earlier this month. He's been, quote, summoned, according to Axios, to meet with members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus this week after some tweets from more than a decade ago resurfaced a day after taking his new job, drawing the ire of some liberal Latino activists and their supporters, some of whom have been calling for him to be ousted. In the tweets from 2010, yes, 2010, Simmons said, quote, just saw two undocumented folks talking on MSNBC, one law student, the other a protester. Can someone explain why ICE is not picking them up? He followed up, replying to one Twitter user saying, quote, we should harden borders and ease visas, find ways to bring undocumented into legal status, punish employers. My question was common sense one. Simmons later tried to clarify his comments at the time, and this is a clarification from then, tweeting, I'll try this again. Just saw two undocumented folks talking on MSNBC and have serious legal question. Why wouldn't ICE pick them up? Now, to the vast majority of Americans, this would seem at least like a reasonable legal question, and at worst, just one that was framed poorly. Many Americans are confused about how our border enforcement works or doesn't work. But of course, in today's cancel culture society, nuance and the age of the tweet are irrelevant to some activists and pundits. One congressman even said he wants to talk to Simmons to find out if he's actually, quote, a Trumper. And herein lies the problem for Democrats. Simmons is a longtime Democratic operative, got his start in professional politics, 92 on the Bill Clinton campaign, 2000 he worked on Al Gore's campaign, served as a Gore spokesman in West Palm during the recount, traveling press secretary to presidential candidates, then Senator Bob Graham and General Wesley Clark in 2004. During the 2008 election, acted as an advisor to the DNC. But you see, that isn't enough to certain doctrinaire Democrats who want to ensure there is no political moderation in the party. Of course, now Simmons had to take to Twitter to acknowledge that some of the comments he made offended some in the Democrats' big tent. He apologized. But Simmons also lamented that people, quote, can forget every other thing I've said in public on immigration because of bad tweets. Well, Of course they do, Jamal. That is what the far left of the Democratic Party has become about. Furthermore, it does seem to some on the left that if you endorse any kind of immigration enforcement, that's grounds to be exiled from the party. Putting aside the legal question he was asking about ICE, is it really radical for him to say we should harden borders and ease visas and find ways to bring undocumented into legal status? It's a position many Republicans would say doesn't go far enough. I just wonder sometimes whether some Democrats want to ensure that they alienate the middle leading into 2022. Here to weigh in is a Democrat running in 2022. Stephanie Gallardo is running for Congress, and thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. So do you think I'm downplaying this or overplaying this?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I would say that you are very much miscalculating the situation, I would say. First of all, the conversation about cancel culture, I think so many folks, what they forget about cancel culture is that people who are, looking to be held accountable by the public, they actually don't ever experience the repercussions of cancel culture. Very rarely do people lose their jobs or experience penalization through the legal system. So when folks say cancel culture, I think they're just trying to hold on to a saying.
That's me, and that's me. That's me using that term, and you can fairly criticize me for overstating it, but I do think that it is consistent with that mentality, which is a small violation, right, of what the most doctrinaire Democrats. Well, look, you earlier this month tweeted Simmons' comments, and you said it should, quote, disqualify him from serving in the White House. I mean, that seems insane.
I could see why some people might think that, but, to give a little bit of context for my commentary on Twitter, I read that tweet, and the first thing that I thought was that he was asking for undocumented people to be rounded up. First and foremost, I'm the daughter of a refugee, I'm the daughter of immigrants, and I'm also the wife of an undocumented person. I live in a community that is largely immigrant and refugee, and so my values demand that I hold true to them and stand in solidarity with the folks that are in my communities. And, to see somebody like Jamal Simmons make a tweet like this, on the heels of the fact that we know the Biden administration is carrying on policies that immigration policies that were started in really the Obama administration and then through the Republican administration with Donald Trump, it was almost like a gut punch. And so I think there needs to be accountability for sure.
Well, but don't you think that when you demand accountability, you are also demanding that the Democratic Party be pulled much further to the left on an issue that is going to kill them politically? I mean, your position, and I respect the fact that this is your position, this is your personal experience, everyone is entitled to that. But your position is also very much a minority one in the country on this kind of issue. And I'm saying that, I'm not saying, and therefore, everyone has to say support the wall. Most Americans are somewhere in the middle when it comes to something like immigration. They do want tougher borders. They do want more enforcement, but they also want legal pathways, et cetera. You're more radical on that, which is fine. But it does seem when you demand that from someone like Jamal Simmons, what you're saying is the Democratic Party has to be pulled further to the left. Am I wrong?
I do think you're wrong. I don't think there's anything radical or anything that, demands pulling the Democratic Party to the left by asking for accountability from someone who is chosen to represent the Democratic Party under the administration. I don't think that has anything to do with left,
but
right,
accountability
center.
For what? So I'm sorry to interrupt, but accountability for what?
Yeah, accountability for his comments. And, to provide additional context, I do actually disagree now with the tweet that I made, because after seeing how this tweet unfolded and seeing his response and seeing that he had reached out to, I believe her name is Erica. She's one of the undocumented people that he was referring to in the tweet. He had a conversation with her, and they essentially squashed the beef, and they were able to work through it. And he also explained himself, and he explained that he was not asking for people to be rounded up. But I think the accountability has to come from the fact that many people read that tweet as asking for undocumented people to be rounded up. So I think that's really
I think it seemed to me like a question that many Americans have, right? Which is when someone goes public, says, I'm undocumented, here I am, is there no enforcement mechanism? Whether you agree or disagree, that is what a lot of Americans are going to watch and they're going to say, and it seems to me that by you saying that that is, that sort of question is unacceptable in whatever form, that you are, and that there ought to be accountability, that you are saying that the Democratic Party has to have accountability to the far left. And I'll give you the final word, 30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that the Democratic Party is the party that really, really tries to cater to immigrant and refugees, whether they do that well or not. And I think that we do have to be accountable in many different forms. And I think accountability is something that is extremely good. And I am interested in learning a little bit more about what Jamal Simmons is going to do moving forward, because he did say that he was interested in showing accountability to the communities that he believed he harmed.
Right. Stephanie Gallardo, thank you for the conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Have a good night.
On this Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, there is a story connected to his life that has created quite the controversy in the state of Alabama. It's about an underappreciated hero of the civil rights movement and about state officials seeking to punish a city for honoring him. Fred Gray is an attorney in Alabama who, among other things, through his illustrious career, represented Rosa Parks after she was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a Montgomery, Alabama bus in December of 1955. He represented Martin Luther King Jr. himself in a little-known case where King was arrested and tried in 1956 for leading a boycott against the bus company and against all of the buses in the city of Montgomery. Dr. King once called Fred Gray, quote, the chief counsel for the protest movement. Beyond his work fighting segregation, he represented the victims of the Tuskegee syphilis study, among many other cases. And if you look at the cases he's been involved with throughout his life, it is hardly surprising that Gray's hometown would want to honor him. And so the mayor of Montgomery, Alabama, decided to rename a major street where Fred Gray grew up from, get this, Jeff Davis Avenue, named for the president of the Confederacy, to Fred Gray Avenue. And in a ceremony in October, the street was officially renamed. Entered the Attorney General of Alabama, who's now threatening to fine or sue Montgomery for this. The AG, Steve Marshall, says that Montgomery violated a state law called the Alabama Memorial Preservation Act, which prohibits the removal of memorials which have stood for more than 40 years. In 2020, as Confederate symbols were being removed in various cities across the state, Marshall warned local officials to leave them intact.
Any elected official who removes a historic monument or statue in violation of Alabama law has broken the law. He has not simply decided to pay a fee so that he can lawfully have the monument or statue removed. He's committed an illegal act.
We invited the Attorney General to come on the show, and through a spokesperson, he declined. Now, I should note that I have a very vested interest here, since I just announced that I have a new book out this May called Alabama v. King, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Criminal Trial That Launched the Civil Rights Movement, which I am co-authoring with Fred Gray. That's how I really became aware of this controversy. So, take it for what you will, but that aside, I find the resistance on the part of the state AG insane. Now, look, on this show, you've heard me argue against the removal of statues of Thomas Jefferson or Theodore Roosevelt, but this is different. Streets get renamed all the time for all sorts of different reasons. And seriously, fining the city for changing the name from Jeff Davis Avenue? But the legal question is, does the state have the discretion here to just drop it? Or is the law so crystal clear that the AG has no discretion? Joining me now is Doug Jones, who served as a federal prosecutor in the Northern District of Alabama. He was, of course, also a Democratic senator representing the state of Alabama. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. So what do you make of all of this from a legal standpoint?
From a legal standpoint, Dan, a prosecutor has the discretion to do what they want to do and to do the right thing. And Steve Marshall always uses his discretion to do what I consider to be the wrong thing. And that is to promote this law, to continue to do it, to threaten cities and counties. It's not the first time. Birmingham was threatened, Huntsville, any number of cities were threatened. The good thing about this is that if he files this lawsuit, the Alabama Supreme Court has already ruled that it's a one-time fine of $25,000, and people will raise the money to pay that, because for enough people in the state of Alabama, not the officials that are in charge right now, There's enough people in the state of Alabama that would gladly raise the money to have Fred Gray's name on that boulevard instead of the president of the Confederate States of America that waged war against the United States.
As a legal matter, is there a difference between a street name and a statue?
Well, according to our Attorney General, and he's the interpreter, and I don't think that this has been challenged just yet in the courts, he says there is none. I think that there's obviously something that was resurrected, a monument, a statue, some memorial. Clearly, a block of granite is different than a street name that can be changed at the whim of the municipality or the county government off and on. But you got to understand, Dan, Alabama is a state that continues to glorify the Confederacy. Our state archives had to issue apologies and redo their whole mantra a couple of years ago because it was founded in 1901 to promote white supremacy. There's articles on AL.com by my friend Kyle Whitmire right now detailing the various things in the state capitol and in Eufaula and other places glorifying the Confederacy. We got monuments to fish and other insects, but we can't move a Confederate monument without getting the wrath of the Republican Attorney General in the state, and it's just really shameful.
All right, I want to ask you now about a completely different issue. I want you to put on your former senator hat. You were viewed as a moderate, almost conservative Democrat because, of course, you came from the state of Alabama, which is a very red state. If you were currently in the Senate right now, would you be voting to get rid of the filibuster?
I'd be voting to reform the filibuster. I'm still not quite there on eliminating completely, but I am absolutely in favor of reforming the filibuster and getting the filibuster back to a day like when I worked in the Senate in the late 1970s, when Bob Byrd was the majority leader, Howard Baker the minority leader. Those are the talking filibusters. I'm absolutely in favor of putting the burden on.
Right, but would you get rid of the 60-vote requirement, though? That's the key. I mean, I understand about the various burdens you can add to the filibuster that used to be there, but would you eliminate the need for 60 votes and just make it a majority vote?
No, you flip the vote. You flip the burden and require 41 votes for the obstructionists to come forward. The filibuster was designed in a way to give the minority a voice, and that's the way it would happen if you had a talking filibuster. It's all the way it always happened. But instead of requiring those that want to see the advancement of the legislation, put the burden on the obstructionists to get 40 votes there. That's what I think is the most likely scenario and outcome here.
I'm going to try one more time, but you would not support then making it by a simple majority of 51, as most Democrats would like to see.
That's an elimination of the filibuster, and I don't think you need to do that, Dan. I really don't believe you need to do that in order to maintain some.
Because without that, the voting rights legislation doesn't get passed.
No, I disagree. If they can reform the filibuster, the rules, I am absolutely convinced it will take a little bit of time, but I'm absolutely convinced that sooner or later they will be able to get a vote that would require a majority vote to get the legislation passed. I absolutely believe that.
All right. Former Alabama Senator Doug Jones, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it. And again, I admitted that I have a great vested interest in this. I have just enormous respect and reverence for Fred Gray.
As do
Coming
I.
up.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Coming up, Prince Harry taking legal action against the British government to try to get official police protection for a trip home. Wait. What happened to I don't want to be treated like a royal anymore? I have no idea if he's got a good argument, so we'll be joined from across the pond by a top British legal expert. Up next. Seems like Prince Harry is maybe regretting that whole we don't want to be a part of the royal family anymore thing. One of the key perks was official security from Scotland Yard, which he now says he needs when he returns to England. Harry says he'll foot the bill. Being a royal makes you very rich after all. But that private security isn't good enough and that it would still be too dangerous. The prince and his wife, Meghan Markle, lost their state-sponsored security detail when they quit their positions as senior royals and moved to Southern California 2 years ago. But now the Duke of Sussex is taking legal action. He wants a British court to review a government decision that blocks him from using London Metropolitan Police officers to provide his security. Harry says his own private bodyguards don't have access to the kind of intelligence or resources that law enforcement does, and therefore can't keep him or his family, which includes his 2 kids, safe. The claim for what's called judicial review was filed in September, but only just came to light now, and it comes after Harry's car was reportedly chased by paparazzi back in July while he was leaving a charity event. Here's the big issue. Private security in the UK cannot legally carry guns. I'm sure that is a huge part of this. But the legal question is whether the man, formerly known as Prince, is legally entitled to the kind of state protection reserved for public officials. When they stepped back from their royal duties and left the country, Harry and Meghan cited the intense British media scrutiny on their lives. It is that same scrutiny Prince is now citing as the reason why he needs police protection when he comes back. This is one of these topics where I have no idea what the law would be. So we're thrilled to have Gary Rycroft, a UK-based lawyer and author of a legal column for the Daily Telegraph, with us. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. So do Harry and Meghan have a case here?
It's good to see you, Dan. Well, what we're talking about here is what we call in the UK judicial review, which is a process for challenging a decision made by a public body. So the court isn't going to look at the decision itself. The court is going to look at the process for reaching that decision. And the JR has been launched against the Home Office. The Home Office is the government department here in the UK that, in working together with Scotland Yard, make decisions about who should have protection paid by the taxpayer and who shouldn't have that.
As a practical matter, how much of this is about the guns, do you think? The fact that private security can't carry weapons?
I think that's a very relevant matter here, because clearly Harry's thinking this is a really important way that I can feel safe, because if I've got someone who is allowed to carry a gun walking next to me and my family are going to be feeling much safer than that. So yes, certainly that's a real practical issue. And also I'm bound to say there is a political issue here as well, because we're talking about taxpayers' money. Yeah.
I mean, so on the whole, based on the way you characterize the way that they review a decision like this, right? They look at the process, et cetera. Do you think that this is a review that Harry can win?
Well, I think there's obviously arguments on both sides, Dan. This is a legal matter, and usually there are arguments on both sides, aren't there? But hey, we've got here, first of all, we've got the situation that, as far as we know, no one was in that room apart from the Queen, Prince Charles, Harry and William. So we don't know what was actually said when Harry, as it were, resigned from the royal family, but a deal was struck. So on the one hand, we've got the deal that was done. On the other hand, we certainly know that Scotland Yard do provide armed guards for people like Tony Blair, for instance, who used to be the Prime Minister, is no longer the Prime Minister, but still affords protection. So just because Harry is no longer part of the royal family doesn't mean that he isn't at risk. He was born into that job. He's never going to get away from it. So I can see that there is precedent there that someone who's left the job still gets protection.
I've only got 10 seconds left, but generally, is the UK public on his side on this?
I saw a poll today where it was quite evenly balanced, to be honest, Dan. So people are kind of can't decide.
Gary Rycroft, thank you so much for taking the time and staying up for us. We really appreciate it.
Cheers, Dan.
Coming up, police officers doing everything they can to get a man with a gun to surrender after he sends his mom a disturbing text, even talking about mass murder. Tense moments captured on police body camera up next. We are on scene tonight with body cam from the Metro Nashville Police Department, showing the dangers officers face across the country. It starts with a 911 call from a mother worried about her son.
He does have a gun. He has texted me pictures of a full magazine of bullets this morning. So he is armed, and I personally would consider him dangerous, but he has never actually been violent. I really don't want the police to kill him. But I don't want him to kill anyone else either. He has talked about, quote, mass murder today in the text messages he's sending me.
The caller said her son, Jacob Griffin, was living in a tent near the Goodwill store where he had worked before getting fired. Griffin had apparently threatened the manager there. Police went to talk to Griffin, who became confrontational. SWAT officers and police negotiators were called to the scene. The mental health unit arrived and signed emergency committal papers for Griffin as officers tried to get him to lay down his weapon.
The first step in this is all up to you, and that's just to walk out here without that pistol. All I'm going to understand is that you're the same person I've been talking to for almost 3 hours.
I am a hypnotist! Get off my property!
The talks continued for hours, with negotiators saying they couldn't leave until Griffin put the gun down and he talked to a counselor.
Jacob, I want you to feel good about this, and that's why I keep saying this is in your control right now.
Griffin fired a shot at officers, you heard that there, who still tried to bring the situation to a peaceful conclusion. As the sun began to set 5 hours after the 911 call, officers put a plan into place to take Griffin into custody using distraction devices, foam bullets, and a police canine.
Hey, show me your hands! Show me your hands! Show us your hands, and I will get him off you! Show your hands! I got. Where's the gun? Where's the gun? Pick it up! Do not move! Shot!
Griffin fired his gun again. The SWAT officer shot him. Griffin died at the hospital. The medical examiner said it was inconclusive whether Griffin died by his own hand or from being shot by the officer. The incident is under review. Joining me now, once again, Chief Anthony Paparo of the Yeadon, Pennsylvania Police Department. All right, Chief, there was clearly a mental health component here. How does that make it different from the officer's perspective in terms of negotiating with him?
Well, you got to negotiate from where the subject may be coming from. You can't feed into any kind of fantasies he may be having, but you also got to try and bring him into reality enough that he'll comply with what you're asking him to do. And he was definitely suffering a medical psychiatric emergency during this incident.
And the fact that the officers arrived with a mental health unit is very significant here, right? Because a lot of times people will say, well, police don't know how to deal with mental health, et cetera. And, you know, whether that's true or not true, I'm just saying this is what people say sometimes. The reality is here, they were actually there with a mental health unit.
Yeah, that's a nationwide thing going on now, where there's a lot of uproar, people asking police to send mental health workers instead of the police. But here's a prime example of where you can't send a mental health worker into an environment like this, where the guy's armed with a handgun and he actually fires several times during this confrontation with police. So mental health workers will not even go into an environment like that until the police say it's safe. So we have to do the best we can. And that's where negotiation skills come into play. And then, sadly, for this case, it didn't work out in the best interest ever.
And I think it's critical to say that his mother talked about the fact that he was talking about mass murder. And so when you have someone who's talking about mass murder and he's got a weapon, the notion of just sending in, you know, a healthcare unit doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, the mother provided them with so much information, including documented picture evidence of what he had. So they knew going in that this was a deadly encounter that they were getting themselves into.
Look, this is a sad situation, and sad to see this. Chief Paparo, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
As always, we want to hear from all of you. Tell me what I'm getting right, getting wrong. Coming up next is News Nation Prime, Morning News. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.